Lifestyle Pirates with Big J and Adriano.
Okay, good morning and welcome to this episode of Lifestyle Pirates. We're joined here by a very special guest. He's coming all the way from Newcastle on the train this morning, Alan Stevens, who is a profiling and communication specialist. Good morning, Alan.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning, Alan. Thanks for making the trip.
My pleasure.
How was the train?
Very vacant as far as people went.
So you were dancing around and enjoying yourself on it?
Had plenty of space to move around if I wanted to.
Yeah, excellent. So, Alan, I think we're going to get straight into this. I'm really keen to listen to what you say about my little Italian stallion friend here with what you do. So I'm going to let you...
What's going on?
Do what you do.
Rightio. Well, first thing is, when I'm working with people, your facial features tell me everything I need to know. They tell me your personality, how you like to think and process. First of all, there used to be a belief that particular face shapes would be criminals and that sort of thing, but they're talking about character there, and we've pretty much debunked that. So it's more a case of, if you lift weights, you're going to build muscles up, and if you build muscles, if you think everything we feel inside, we express outwardly, so you put those together, you think in a certain way, you're going to create ridges and crevices on your face, structure, and therefore that's your personality, how you like to think and process.
Wow. So go on, do me. I'm interested there.
Yeah, well, that's always an interesting one when somebody says, do me.
Sorry, I should have been a bit clearer there. So are you getting really all of that from this?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so if I look at you straight away, I know that when you meet people for the first time, you like a little bit of space to check them out. Mm-hmm. It's like when we came through the door, you reached out to shake my hand.
Yeah.
So I know that someone like you needs a bit of space. At the same time, I know Jonathan doesn't need as much space. He'll stand a little bit closer to people. Yeah. It's not that you're not friendly, it's that you're more discerning. You want to check out who's safe to be around and who's not safe to be around. And so I can see that in your face.
Spot on. All right, you got me there.
I knew you love this guy.
I know as well, when it comes to taking information, you like the big picture, the overview. The least amount of information as possible. Yeah. Get that information, and then the other trait I can see is just give me the best way to do it and get out of the way and let me get it done.
Mate, that is so me. Just cut the bullshit, just tell me what it is and that's it. Let's move on. Nah, that's brilliant.
And I know you're going to be fairly fussy about things. The things have got to be exactly right when you're working with them. There's no half measures. You've got to be fairly concise when you're talking to people. And you are very quick to give of your time and your energy and your expertise to people.
Did you tell him something?
I've told him zero. I promise you. I'm looking into the camera, into the eyes. I've told Alan nothing. This is why we've got him on the show, guys.
Mate, I'm sweating bullets right now. What else are you going to bring up?
Well, I know you're adventurous as well, so you like to try new things.
I do.
I guarantee you like to travel.
I do. Yeah. I do.
And when you're working on something, if you're really focused on it, Jonathan, don't go over and tap him on the shoulder and say, come over here and help me right now, because he's not going to want to come.
Yep.
He wants to be left alone to where he can get to a point. So if you need his help, you just say, look, how much time do you need before you can get to a point where you can leave it? 5, 10 minutes? If he says 10, go back in 11 or 12.
Yeah.
Don't go back in 9, because he'll know.
Man, that is brilliant. People listening to this who know me and work with me as well are just going to be going.
We're actually going to send it to your HR department.
Yeah, no way. Oh my God, that's fantastic.
And if anyone's selling to him as well, on the value, not the service, it's got to be at the right price.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, cut the sales pitch. Just, let's get down to it.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
And so when you talked earlier about the muscles and the facial side of things, that obviously takes time to build up. So would your profile of someone change over the years, or are you pretty accurate from over time?
It comes down to when you're first born, there are traits that are passed down from your parents. Mm-hmm. All the research that the psychologists have done over all the generations and centuries, they've realised that you'll have traits that are passed from your parents, but then you'll have traits that you develop in response to your environment. Mm. So things that are passed down the DNA, they're pretty much locked in place. But as we get older, more and more traits start to show, and they're the ones that we call nurture traits. And so things will change. Mm-hmm. It's like, I know, looking at you, the corner of your mouth slightly turns up, and therefore more optimistic than somebody who's more likely to be pessimistic. Mm-hmm. Somebody who frowns a lot, the mouth will turn down. But you put them in an environment where they're able to joke a lot more, they're a lot happier, the mouth will start to turn up again. So that trait will change. But as far as confidence levels, how much time you need to work on things, etc., they will stay in place.
So how high is your accuracy or success rate or hit rate
Well,
do you
when
think
they
it would
first worked with this, they found that, and funny enough, it was developed by a judge in the Supreme Court in California. He was like me, he'd worked in just about every industry you can think of, and in that period of time, everyone who came in front of him, he knew that face traits would not be a criminal, but if anyone committed a crime, it's a matter of choice, and we based on your personality. So somebody who's focused on the money, it'll be a crime of finance. If they're highly emotional, it's going to be one of passion.
Yeah.
So he came up with about 125 traits. That was about the 1920s. There was some researchers that started working with him, a gentleman by the name of Robert Whiteside and his wife Elizabeth Whiteside, and they brought it down to about 68 traits that when they asked a person, they said, right, we're seeing this. These are the two extremes. We think you would be more this end. 99 times out of 100, the answer from the person, their family, their work colleagues, etc., was yes.
Yeah.
And so they threw all the other traits out and kept those 68.
Yeah, wow.
Now, when they put it together in the 1940s, the American Air Force wanted to know who would finish their pilot's training before they started it. They were 94% accurate.
Wow.
Down to and including the type of aircraft they would fly.
Oh, mate, that's detail.
And that's it, because different types of aircraft, different personality requirements,
Okay.
different styles of flying. So that's where that came from. I then worked with all of this. I also trained with the Paul Ekman group with the micro-expressions, the little twitches on the face that tell me your personality.
Yeah.
Your emotions.
Yeah.
And also your body language, which I've been working with since the 1970s.
Yeah.
And I had my NLP masters, so I thought, right, facial features will tell me your personality. If I then structure the words and speak to you in the way that you want to be spoken to, so change the way that I would normally want to be spoken to myself to match you, I would then be able to connect with you, and with the body language and expressions, I've now got the reading as to whether I read you right or not.
Yeah.
Now, to answer your question, I've profiled tens of thousands of people, and I wouldn't say that I'm 100% accurate, but I'm yet to be proven wrong.
That's a lot to take in right now. So there's a lot. So when you're reading someone, obviously there's a lot of different things that you have to look at, like non-verbal, verbal, and so when you go, if you're at a party or something like that, are you always on? Are you always reading someone? Are you always sort of?
As far as the,
do you switch off, or is this
part
something
of it
now?
I do.
Yeah.
Part of it I won't.
Yeah.
Simply because reading someone's facial features to understand their personality means that I can have a better conversation with them.
Yeah.
So I'd never turn that off.
Yeah, of course.
Because I know that you're being a little bit more the big picture, and I'm being very analytical, and I need a lot of information. And I start talking to you, and you're going to be interested at first, but then I'm going to watch you go
Drift off, yeah.
drift off, and go, or trying to finish my sentences off and rush me on.
Yeah.
Well, if I know that in advance, the conversation you and I have is going to be a lot more enjoyable.
Okay.
And so I won't switch that off.
Yeah.
But as far as whether you're telling me the truth or not, at a party, I know the fish wasn't that big. It was that big. I don't need to have that turned on for that.
Yeah, fair enough.
You know, and you joke and you tell stories because it's all about fitting in and having fun. But in the situation of where it's an interrogation or it's an interview, then it's going to be switched on.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very different situation.
I'm selective when it comes to that side of it.
Would you think it's a talent, a gift, something that you've worked on, developed? Like, because it must
Not with
have
my
to have
history, I can tell
No?
you. No, I went through 2 divorces, a lot of relationships,
Yeah.
business partners who emptied the bank out, all massive different things.
Yeah.
And it was...
What happened there, Alan? How come you didn't see that coming?
I wish I'd had the skills back there, I can tell you. But see, everybody's got these skills because every child... Well, think about it. If anybody who's listening to this has got children, young children, how close do they push you to the edge but not push you over? They know exactly how far to take you because they're reading our emotions all the time. It's survival. We needed the facial features to recognise somebody. Are they a friend? Are they a foe?
Yeah.
Then when we were talking to them, or they were around us, we need to pick up their expression to know whether they were angry or sad or whatever. So if it's somebody you shouldn't be around and they're angry, get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
If it's a friend who, somebody you do know who's angry, you might want to go, well, what's going on? Can I help you? So it's a combination. We use all of those all the time. As a child, though, it's like any muscle. If you don't work it, it atrophies. And that's what happens. We start getting interested in sports. We're going to school. We're looking at cars. We're dating, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And it's just like riding a push bike. If you don't ride a push bike for a while, when you get back on it, you're pretty shaky.
Yeah.
How many times have you heard somebody speak and everything they've said sounded perfectly right, but you've had that gut feeling, no, something's wrong?
Yeah.
You picked up the non-verbals. And you'll generally find that the words were right, but the shift of the body, the tone of voice, the colour of their skin in their face, all of those things, the little twitches on their face, the micro expressions, you'll pick those up unconsciously, and you'll go, bang, I don't trust this person.
Yeah.
At the same time, how many times have you seen somebody who reminds you of somebody who's done the wrong thing by you in the past? And your natural thing is, I don't like them.
Yeah.
Now, because we pick up each other's energies and we read all this stuff non-verbally, if you're pulled back from them, they pick up that something's going on and they pull back from you. And next thing you know, we've created a self-fulfilling prophecy. We prove that they're not trustworthy because they pulled away from us.
Yeah.
But we drove that. So all I really do is I step into the middle of that and show you what is real and what's your bias.
Yeah.
So that you can make a better judgment call on that person.
And out of interest, is there a percentage split on people that their bias is more listening or more kind of verbal cues or more the body language side of things? Or is everybody processing the same stuff?
Everyone's processing, has got the same stuff to process, but it depends on where our focus goes. In NLP, they talk about us having about 2 million bits of information coming in through all of our senses, through our visual, auditory, kinesthetic.
What's NLP, other than National Labour Party?
Neuro-linguistic programming.
Okay.
So the words we use to steer conversations. And with that side of it, they say, well, we're taking all this information in 2 million bits, but we process 134 bits. There's only about 7 items plus or minus 2 that we really handle.
Is this per second? Per
second.
Right.
But so therefore it depends on where your focus is. If I'm susceptible to while I'm sitting here, you're looking at me, I'm looking out there and I can see the trees outside. So part of my attention goes to the outside view. You're not seeing that, but yet it's around us. At the same time, I could be susceptible to the temperature in the room and I'll notice that more. So you can only focus on so much. Think of the last time you were going to you're in the car driving and you're going to find a particular location. You know the street and everything else. You've got the radio going, you've got the window down and all the rest of it, and you're watching all the stuff around you. How many times when you get close to looking for the number itself, you turn the radio off?
Yeah, that fascinates me.
Because the brain can't handle more than about 7 items at a given time.
Is that why?
I did that trying to get out of a multi-story car park once.
Yeah.
I had the music on. I was driving quite a big car. It was a very tight multi-story car park, and I had to turn the music off. I had to put the windows down. I had to turn the sensors off because the sensors were driving me nuts.
That's because you're a crap driver, though.
Anyway, so Alan, how are you? But no, I know exactly what you mean. And yeah, you're right. When you get, especially when you've not been there before, when you do get closer to somewhere, you need to focus a little bit, pinpoint. And even people in the car next to you, shut up. I need to. Where are we going to go?
Yeah, it's really bizarre, right? It's like. Yeah, like turn the music down. I'm trying to look.
Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense.
As crazy as it sounds, that's exactly what's going on because we can only handle so much at a time.
Yeah.
So all the information's there, but each person will be handling different parts of that information simply because of their focus.
And so, so if you look at Adriano, would you be able to tell typically what occupation he was in? I guess is there a limit to how?
With this, if, say you look at a young child, there are traits you can see in there. I can tell you what a child is going to be like before they get to school. Are they going to have problems with the education system?
Right.
And I've helped a lot of parents, work with their children and also, more than anything, work with the teachers and teach the teachers how their child needs to learn.
Right.
Even kids with autism and Asperger's and taking them off medication, the whole bit. So that's the first area. So we know that by the time they get to school, we can tell you what hobbies and sports the child will really thrive with. And if it is a sport like soccer, what position in soccer would they play? Down the wing or in the centres or whatever?
So you can get a sense of whether someone's going to be better at team sports rather than individual sports, or action-based rather than maybe chess, or something that's a bit more.
All of that's in there. And then when you get older, one of the reasons I want to get this into the hands of all the school teachers, especially career counsellors, is that before the child picks their final subjects that are going, like in high school, before they go into their career. Because how many people have done a university degree and then never used it?
Yeah.
Or they've had a couple of university degrees and they're lucky to stay in that industry, although when they do start working, they're only there for a couple of years. And they go, look at school teachers. 40% of all the school teachers, when they finish their training, won't see the inside of a classroom other than their prac work they do. And then 40% of those that are remaining are gone in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And so we lose a fortune on training these people because, somebody says to them, oh, you should do this, or they have an interest in children or whatever, and then they find the particular work they're doing, the aspects of it, don't align with what they thought it would be.
Okay.
So if we can help a child get a better understanding of the career that will suit their personality, they can then go into those studies, go into do those studies, then go into that career, and then it's just a matter of the only reason they will change organisations is for an advancement in that particular career, or well, we know that 87% of people at the moment are disengaged in their work, and that's due to lack of leadership. We've got
87% of people are
worldwide.
Disengaged in their work.
That's it.
In Australia or worldwide?
This was the Gallup research that was done worldwide in the Western countries. In 2016, it was 66%. Of that 66%, 48% were disengaged, and the remaining 18% were actively disengaged. And when you've got people who are actively disengaged, they're whinging about their organisation, within the organisation and outside. And so the people who did like their work before are always hearing this whinging all the time, and they get dissatisfied because they think there should be better expectations in that job.
Yeah.
And so in 2018, it hit 87%.
Wow. That's that toxic sort of mentality.
That's it.
Yeah.
So if you've got people who are happy in their work, the end result is they're going to be more productive.
Yeah.
If we've got the managers and are taught this so they become actual leaders, then you'll find that the people are going to really love the work they're doing. The management can go on holidays and the company will grow in their absence because people will take ownership of it. If they're happy at work, they're going to be happier at home. So that's one way of reducing domestic violence, because domestic violence comes from people who are frustrated.
Yeah. Wow, it's a big knock on.
And then, if they're happy, excuse me, so are their children. If their children are happy, they're not going to school and bullying others, because bullying is usually a learnt behaviour. If somebody feels put down all the time, they will then put somebody else down who's smaller than them or weaker than them to feel better about themselves. It's just a human nature. It's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just the way we're wired. It's all about survival.
How much does the environment, and if we look at schools, how much does the environment affect the nurture of these traits and behaviours?
Hugely. Because, as I said, there's around about the 50%, roughly, give or take a few percent here and there, of your traits which are nature traits, and the others are all nurture traits. And those nurture traits are a response to our environment. The psychologists back in Texas, there was what they call the Texas adoption trials. This was done quite a few decades ago. And they found the children who had been adopted, where they knew at least the mother, their natural mother as well. And at the age of 7 and 17, they profiled them and looked at their personalities. And around, give or take a bit, around the 50% of their personalities were identical to their biological parents that they may have been taken away from at the age of, only a few months old. And so they were adopted out. So they measured both the adopted parents, excuse me, the parents who adopted them, plus also their natural parents where they had them, and they found that there were so many traits which had been passed down in the DNA. And then you take a couple of, like two children who are identical twins, put them in different environments. They will still have a lot of similarities, which will be the nature trait of the traits. But then the nurture traits, there'll be differences in them because of the environment in which they grow up in. Because if you're somebody who just likes the big picture, and you've got you're with parents who are always analytical and they need more information, so when they talk to you and talk about cleaning your room and everything else, they're just going to come across like they're nagging you. Yeah. And straight away, your response to it is every time someone talks to me, they're putting me down, they're nagging me. Well, that's going to have a negative effect. But all they need to do is change and just give the overview and give you a reason as to why that overview is important. Yeah. And straight away, you go and do it and you're happier. So
fascinating.
Everything that's in the first 7 years of life, this is where all the imprinting's done. So we look at men and women when they're getting older and we go, sort yourself out, you should be over all this stuff. No, it was imprinted in those very early years, the first 7 years. And that's where most of the traumas in later life have come from. They're extensions of what we went through at that age. And all of this, this is why a young child, I can tell you which ones are going through a lot of stress, even to the point of which ones are suicidal. That's also in their features as well.
I mean, I don't really remember an awful lot about my childhood. I know it wasn't bad. Nothing stands out from a bad side of things, but I don't know, maybe kind of 5, 6, 7, there's some bits the bits were cool, but before then I don't really recall a lot. But you're saying that they're very impressionable years, and they can make or break effectively.
Well, think about a baby that's just been born. Dad comes over, but brand new dad, never had a baby before in his life. Picks the child up, the child just starts crying. Then the mother picks up, or one of the other women comes over, aunties, grandmothers, that sort of thing, and the baby just starts gurgling again. And then Dad tries to pick the baby up, and straight away Dad goes, "Oh my God, baby hates me." No, it's the baby's picking up his fear, because most men are worried about breaking a baby. I just had my sixth grandchild born a couple of weeks back.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congrats.
And she's tiny. And I know that my son's mother, who I divorced many, many years ago, she's going to get a nose out of joint when she finds it outside of the nurses and the parents. I was the very first person to nurse the baby.
Yeah.
So I'll use that for later. I said to him, "Don't tell your mother." He said, "No, I won't tell her." I said, "No, leave that for me."
Let me have that.
Yeah. But, I was very conscious when I picked her up of just how delicate, because head's so tiny, the neck as well.
Yeah.
And even though the head's tiny, it's still got a fair bit of weight, and that neck's got to hold the weight. So you pick it up, and because I've had, I raised my three boys on my own when their mum left, and I've got the 6 grandkids, or the 5 before that. I ruffle tumble the older ones and all the rest of it. Well, that side of it, I'm used to the children.
Yeah.
And so, but I can imagine a young father, for the very first time, picks the baby up, and he's going to be worried. The baby's going to pick that up.
Yeah. Why do they pick up so much when they're younger? Is it because there's nothing else?
There's nothing else
Yeah.
there. They don't understand our words.
Yeah.
This is when
Anything,
they talk.
really.
No, they've got it's virtually an empty vessel,
Yeah.
and it's just they're the greatest learning, because everything around them they take in, and they add every little bit to it, and they build more up and more up. So if someone's yelling all the time, then that's going to affect the child.
Yeah.
And in fact, the child, when we go through puberty, the hormones that hit our body are pretty dramatic, especially with men's testosterone when it hits.
Yep.
Well, about the same level of testosterone will hit a male child in the 7 weeks in the womb.
Really?
That early. This is when
For the development of the baby?
Yeah, this is all about when the brain takes on that masculine or feminine direction. And that's why I always say to guys that if your wife is feeling depressed and worried and everything else, she's got more estrogen in her body to protect herself. And you want a masculine son, start treating your wife with great respect long before you even think about getting her pregnant. Because if she's happy, then the hormones in her body are going to be conducive to the child to grow up as a very masculine boy.
Is that scientific fact?
Yep. There's
Wow.
a lot of research on it. There's a lot of documentation out there on it.
So just to repeat that back, so if couples would like a son,
No, it's not about whether you want a son or a daughter.
Right.
It won't select the gender.
Right.
But what it is that if you do have a son in the womb, and if your mother's worried and of course she feels she's not being looked after, the husband's abusive or whatever, then the child is more likely to be more of a feminine structure in the brain.
It starts that early on.
It starts that early.
far out.
And when I heard,
That's shocking.
so when I heard that, this is one of the reasons why all the men out there who are thinking about they've got to be tough and everything else, stop trying to be the man. Be a man.
Yeah.
And if you're a man, then everyone else is trying, all the other males are trying to be a man, then you're all going to be the best version of yourself. And who do you want to hang around?
Yeah.
Other men who are the best version of themselves as well. If you're trying to be the man, you're in competition. And guess what? You're going to lose on so many levels, and one of them is with that child.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of men grow up and go, "Oh, my son just doesn't connect with me. He's always connected with his mother. He's a mother's boy." Well, guess whose fault it is, mate? Goes back that far.
His mouth is still open from your opening statement. I get the sense with what you do, there are so many applications for this. I mean, this has blown my mind. Hence why getting you on the show. Where do you tend to hang out? I saw on your LinkedIn profile you've done a bit with Disney, you've done a bit with police. Gillette, I found was quite interesting. But where traditionally, because you've been in this for like 50 years, haven't you?
Well, I've been in this game learning all the way through for about that period of time. The face profiling side of it, the facial features, the facial expressions, they're about 2008.
Yep.
I'd had been with Telecom for 23 years. I left them. Where I first got thrown in at the deep end, I was 23 years old and put in charge of a group of men in telecom in Newcastle. That was just after they left the PMG and before they became Telstra. And my second in charge was 38 and I was 23. Tried to get them on side.
Yeah.
And so, when I left, half my staff wanted to resign and come with me when I left them in Christmas 91. And at that point, I've worked in that many different areas. So I started off with body language at that stage, trying to read what was going on, because that was the flavour of the month with Alan Pease and others who were out there. And then I started looking at psychometric profiling, like Myers-Briggs and DISC and all those sort of measurement systems. And in the early 2000s, I was working with a company that wanted to, they were teaching currency trading, and none of the students made any money. As soon as they went live, they started losing money. And so I said, look, you're going to have to look at their personalities. You've got to figure out what's going on. The guy who was doing the training, Doug, was absolutely brilliant. He was an ex-trader. He'd been on the floor in companies, and now he was trading for himself. He was a great instructor. But when you put your money on the table, all the stuff you've been taught goes out the window because all your triggers come on. And so we started profiling them with the Myers-Briggs and DISC, started training them, and still they weren't fitting their profiles. So I asked a couple, and they said, we tried to figure out what sort of personality we had to be a good trader. And I'm going, no, that doesn't work. I need to know your personality. And it was a few years later, around about 2007, I started looking around. 2008, I was doing a workshop for a friend of mine who was running a spiritual retreat, and we were doing a Myers-Briggs workshop, so going through the different dichotomies and role-playing and things. And at the end of it, a guy walked up to me and said, you ever looked at reading faces? Now, my attitude to life is the most important thing I'll ever learn is the next thing I learn after I think I know everything. So I got onto...
Great message.
Yeah, well, I got onto Google and found Paul Ekman. He did all the research on the micro-expressions. He started on those in 1969. And then found a lady by the name of Naomi Tickle, who's ended up being a beautiful personal friend of mine now, over there in LA. Went over or San Francisco, went over and trained with her, and put the two areas together and created rapid trait profiling, along with the words that we use and being able to read the body language. And that became unique universally. And so from there on, my whole approach now is to create and train my competition. But because it's so unique, it was in about 2015, around about that time, I put a video together with a mate of mine where he asked me questions and I recorded it with the camera. Then he went home and I sat down and answered the questions, spliced it all together. So the worst video you've ever seen. He's reading from the clipboard. And then I'm talking back to him, all excited. Then it's back to him monotone, then back to me excited. Well,
the disconnect.
There's a bit of pressure there, Adriano, when you put this together.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
So I put that up on YouTube, and in 1 month it hit 80,000 views. And I went, this is bizarre. Well, when it hit 70,000, that was when Disney Films and Gillette got in touch with me and said, well, we've got the Star Wars launch for Rogue One in London. We've got Gillette were doing their new razor, which they were using all the players from Rogue One as part of the ad.
I remember that, yeah.
They hired me, flew me to London to speak on their behalf. It's a great gig. They flew in 120 journalists from around the world, and my job for a 10-day holiday, 3 hours work, fully paid and everything else, chauffeur-driven everywhere, and they paid me to be interviewed by the world's press.
Wow.
I forgot to ask you guys, how much are you paying me?
John, you got this one. Yeah, I got breakfast.
Yeah. There's a couple of bottles of wine out back. So they interviewing, asking what about the Star Wars characters, or just asking about what you do?
Well, because Gillette were the major players in this, and it was all about their razor, they had 4 what looked like escape pods set up, and I was in the first one. In the second one, there was a male hair groomer, do your hair in barber and your shaving and everything else, and structuring your beard, how the beard actually changes the image that people see of you in the particular shape. And so my job then was to talk about the expressions and everything else and the stories the face tells. Because, yes, 2 people can have exactly the same shaped beard, but if they've got different shaped faces, they're going to look completely different and give us different impressions. So that was my job in there, and the other 2 pods were set up with the engineers or scientists from Gillette. And they worked out how they do all the testing for the new razors, not just having a blade and scraping it across your face. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And so that's where that started. But just before I'd gone over, I'd done some workshops for the Federal Police here in Sydney. And then when I got back, I was down in Canberra doing training down there. So, but my job there was not to teach them how to catch liars, but really how to build stronger connections, especially if you're going undercover. Well, the crims read people really well because that's how they survive. But if you're a policeman who's lived with friendlies, okay, people around you got guns, but they're all on the same side as you. You go undercover or you go out into those communities, you're going to be able to read those people. You've got to be able to pick up, first of all, we're baseline, and that's what the facial features tell us.
Yeah.
And then after that, we're looking for the variations through the body language and expressions that now tell us that something new is going on. So, but my major area that I love, like I work with businesses of all sizes. I work with parents, school teachers. I particularly love working with parents, help them understand their children, and then work with school teachers. And then from there, usually small and medium enterprise organisations, because I'm actually dealing with the person who runs the business. And I'm teaching, because usually if you go to a corporate, someone upline wants you to train the people downline.
Yeah.
And the person upline's the one who definitely needs it the most.
Yeah, they're the problems. Yeah. You're still speechless.
I've got so much in my head.
Go on.
I think we breezed over that. Well, for me personally, I want to hear more about that criminal side of thing, because I think we just brushed over that in 30 seconds, and I'm not happy with that. So
there's that detail you were talking about, Alan.
There we go. There was that photograph we were going to look at before.
Yeah, exactly. Alan, you told me you're going to keep that a secret. So how does that happen? Like, how did the police get a hold of you to put you into a scenario where you have to read crims, or how does it all work?
Well,
like, it's so... We just brushed over that so quickly.
Where this first one came from, when I first got invited in, was the fact that I turned up at the Masonic Lodge down here in Sydney. There was they had a federal policeman who was going to be doing a talk there, and I thought, I'll go along to that. And I was standing there, I was talking to some of the other people outside, and we were all asking each other, what do you do, etc., why are you here, and all the rest. And while I was chatting, I didn't realise that the policeman who was going to give the talk was in his, not in uniform, but in his suit, and he's standing behind me. So he listened to the whole conversation of what was going on, and then pulled me aside at the end of it and said, can we have a chat? And a couple of months later, I was down in Sydney here doing a presentation to him down there.
Yeah.
And that's how it started there. But
what were you saying in that conversation?
I was just talking about how to read people, micro-expressions, body language, just a general overview, some of the stuff we've been talking about here today. And that was enough to trigger his interest, because they don't get that sort of training. Yeah.
So, mate, I've got to ask, elephant in the room, if you're really good at reading people, you good at poker?
The thing is, you've got to remember too that when you're playing, if you can control your tells, then you're good at it. I can read other people's, because sometimes I might be pulling a few expressions and everything. I was trying to read them, but then they probably won't know, am I doing that because I'm reading them, or is it my cards?
Yeah.
So it could confuse them.
It's just like a double agent.
Going back to the body language side of things, when you see some high-profile people get interviewed on TV, presidents, some of the royal family, you always get the kind of body language specialists that come out and they try and surmise or try and add a bit of seasoning to the story. How accurate are they in your kind of thoughts, views, and opinions?
Well, generally, you've got to be careful, because they do get steered by the direction of the questions. Because the person asking the questions will have an ulterior motive. Because that's where my first stint on TV started. Somebody had, I think it was one of the breakfast shows had passed to the Daily Edition, because they were looking for somebody who could read. I think it was Julie Bishop, her eye roll in Parliament. Yeah. And it was lucky that day I was in Sydney. I'd just been down here to see a client. They got in touch with me and said, if we send you a clip... First of all, did you see it? I said, no, I hadn't been watching the news. And they said, well, if we send you a quick clip, it's only about 30 seconds or so, could you read it and tell us what you're seeing? So I had a quick look, and I rang them back and said, well, this is what I'm seeing in it. And they said, and besides that, there's more than just the expressions, there's also the features. Got a bit of discussion of that, and next thing I was about to get on the train to go back to Newcastle, and they said, can you come up to the studio? And I was on the Daily Edition that day talking about her, and also Kate Middleton with one of the eye rolls that she had. So
and what was your conclusion on these eye rolls?
Well, it was bunged on to a degree with Julie Bishop's. It was emphasised because she was trying to show everybody she was annoyed with the comment that was made from her own side next to her. And that's the whole thing. Recently, I had a group or they call themselves the Voice of Victoria, on Instagram, and they asked me to do a profile of Dan Edwards down there, the Premier, and I went...
Dan Andrews?
Dan Andrews, I should say, yeah. They said, can you profile me? I went, yes, and I know that when they were asking the questions, I give them both sides of it. I give the positives and I also give the negatives.
Yeah.
And I could tell by some of the questions that were asked, we're sort of trying to, because you can't help it. Everyone has biases.
Yeah,
and it's
of course.
hard to turn them off.
Yeah.
And so the questions are going to be steered a little bit in direction of that bias.
Okay.
And I could pick that up. So every time when I've talked about something that people would see as a negative and get excited about and everything else, I also gave a direction in the other side on the positive. And so explaining that, but also pointing out that I wouldn't like to have been a politician in this situation because there is no win with it. We haven't been through it before.
That's the thing, yeah.
We can only go on the advice we're given and everything else, and there's there's going to be people who love us and there's going to be people who hate us, and there's nothing we can do about that.
So that's a really good point. We had Nick Dunn is a kind of early on in his career, but a stand-up comedian, and we were talking a lot about context on jokes. And a lot of comedians like your Jim Jeffries, Bill Burr, they will tell a joke over an hour and a half, and they'll loop back to it. So context is really, really important in that joke and in that when you're trying to get a message across. Going back to your eye rolls, how easy is it for you to bring in that context, or are you not doing because you don't have the context? Is that why you go the positive and the negative to try and balance it out, or
no? That's just showing
do you need
respect
that
to the person I'm profiling as well, because I know if somebody's got an agenda, I'm not going to play to their agenda.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not going to support their bias and influence their audience. Because when it comes to the profiling, I don't do it flippantly. I do it with total respect for the person. If I'm profiling somebody who's a bit of a crimp, I'm still going to do it with respect.
Okay. So you don't use your own bias?
I try and cut it out.
Because that must be almost impossible to do.
That's exactly right. We've all got bias, and that's one of the reasons why I'm really pedantic about that, to moderate my own biases as much as I can as well.
Yeah.
Because it's one of the reasons why I stopped watching the news quite some time ago. So if somebody says to me, okay, can you profile something, I'll send me a clip because I haven't been watching it.
Yeah.
Because, and that's one of the things when I used to be a massage therapist and I was working with terminally ill patients and everything else, and I'd get them to stop watching the news. That was the first thing. And they'd stop watching the news, and their happiness started to come back in again. And if you're happy, because every thought we have creates a chemical reaction.
Yeah.
So your negative thoughts, unhappy thoughts are going to create negative chemicals, and they attack different organs of the body.
Yeah.
And so
it seems to be very common at the moment with people saying, stop watching the news.
Yeah, well, what I look at it is, there's an old saying that, give me the wisdom to be able to recognise the things that I can change and the things that I can't change, and to have the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the news, I look and go, can I change it? Is there something there that I need to know? Okay, well, if there's restrictions, like today I'm catching up with a few friends down here in Sydney, and some of them are from the North Shore. I won't be catching up with them because I've just heard that they've been asked not to go anywhere because of the recent pod that started up over there. And with that, I want to know for those things. But as far as hearing the stuff over and over, it's like when the 9/11, when the planes hit the buildings. How many times did the planes hit the buildings, and how many times did we see them hit the buildings?
Yeah.
Day after day, minute after minute, they were bang, bang, bang.
For years.
Yeah. And every time that happens, we have a reaction to it.
Yeah.
And if it's not something that we can change, then it becomes a negative effect on us.
Why do the news show us all of those things then? There's NLP in that as well, isn't there?
Yeah, well, news sells. Bad news sells, good news stories don't.
It's just it's just economical.
That's one of my views on it. Some people might say that that's not really totally true, but it's a strong reason.
Yeah.
So they're not going to get their clients, their advertisers, if nobody's watching.
Yeah.
And that's why you always have that breaking news, first to see, first to sight, exclusive release, all that stuff. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I'm seeing a new trend of certainly people that I work with and in my networks of people that don't watch the news in the morning. They might put on just some relaxing music. They're meditating in the morning. They're not even checking emails until they get to the office. Because a lot of people went through this stage of they wake up, they check emails. Now, before they've even brushed their teeth and jumped into the shower, they're on. They're in work mode, and they're getting anxious around things that they probably can't influence for another hour, depending on their commute time. But yet they're on. They've not even given themselves time to wake up. So I'm seeing this new wave, and that might talk to your leadership comment, about people just not being actively engaged. Where people go, actually, I'm choosing to have that first half an hour of the day to myself, to build up for the day and then come down from the day afterwards. So, and I hope that's better for people's health and their wellness as well. But the news as well, I've noticed a lot more people they're not watching it. And I even got a sense with COVID that the news reporters, the journalists, got bored of reporting COVID. You could see it probably halfway through where they wanted to tell other stories because they didn't have updates. And to your point, waiting for the various ministers and everything going on to give them information, they didn't have it, and they were just repeating themselves.
Yeah, well, I was on one breakfast show, and they came in and they said, well, we're running late, so we're going to have to cut your section down because what we have after you is that it was a dog and cat show. And so the segment, they'd had me working the day before, getting a whole mass of information, sending photographs and everything through to them so they could have it all ready on the screen when we talked about it. And it was just rushed because there was the other news had delayed everything because they played it over and over. And then it was a rush to be able to get through the rest of the...
For a dog and cat show.
For a dog and cat show.
Fascinating. Look, I do like cats.
We'll never compete against children and animals.
Nah, you're never going to win.
If they told me that there was going to be a show on the animals after me, I would have asked them, but they changed it around.
Yeah, exactly.
Go on afterwards.
Yeah. So going back to your point on working with teachers and families, I want to come back to the corporate space as well because a lot of us are in corporate. I remember my school back in the UK had and this was many years ago, it had a dyslexic wing, if I can put it that way. So it had classrooms that were specific and built and for children with learning difficulties, and that was still quite young in I guess the knowledge and awareness of what children with learning difficulties and dyslexia were about. Now there seems to be a lot more autism. There seems to be a lot more awareness. I guess my question to you is, are you seeing that the teachers are open to having conversations and learning from you and taking your information in? And also, do they have the resources to then act accordingly and, I guess, tailor their curriculum or the way they're articulating the lessons to each child? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
There's a lot of issues here because teachers have got 24 to 30 kids in the classroom.
Yeah.
Unless they say a Montessori school where it might be 8 or 10.
Yeah.
But what you'll find is that those teachers got a curriculum they've got to get to. They've got so much pressure on them. They've also got parents going, why isn't my little Johnny or Julie doing better than what they are?
Or little Adriano.
Yeah. Because once upon a time it was a case if didn't have a good report card, our parents would roast us.
Yeah.
Oh.
But now the parents go down and roast the school teachers.
Correct.
Why
Is that what it's like now?
That's what it's like
Yeah.
now.
I missed
And
out.
so the teachers are under so much pressure, and so the end result with that is the teacher's got to follow that procedure. So when I've talked to a number of schools, I've actually had some teachers say to me, look, we don't even have 15 minutes a day to spend on anything else. Because I don't know of any school teacher who became a school teacher for the long holidays and the high pay. Because they don't get long holidays, they're usually working when the kids are on holidays.
Yeah.
They're creating new courses, they're marking other ones, etc. They've also got to do their ongoing professional development programs and all the rest of it. And because of the stresses they're going through, there's a lot of sick leave, which then causes a lot of problems for the principal with the budgets. And now you've got pressures on the principal, and the pressures on the principal go back onto the school teachers. Mm-hmm. But the whole problem is that, if a teacher is able to read the child, when they've got these skills, they have a much better connection straight away. But it's a catch-22. I haven't got the time to learn the skills that I need to be able to fix the problems that I've got. And so where this came really forward to me was about 10 years ago. I had a young woman who was single mum. She managed hotels and working on long hours and everything, and she was relying on the school teachers and the after-schools care a lot. And she first of all got me, she was running a singles group as well called Busy and Single, where you go to meet people without going to pubs and clubs. And I did an event for her. It was called How to Avoid the Psychopath and Other Practical Dating Tips. And we had a bit of fun with that. So she had a good idea of how I worked. And at the end of it, she said, I've got a 6-year-old son, and he's got Asperger's. Can you profile him? I said, yeah, of course I can. And I said, will he sit still? And she said, no. And I said, right, can you take some photographs? I want one face on, one over each of the shoulders, one standing up, and one I want to see the shape of his hand. Not going into palmistry and that, but just the structure of the fingers, etc. She took those photographs and sent them through to me, and he was in different outfits, so she even had trouble getting the photos taken. And I profiled him, sent her a written report, She went back to the school and took the report with her to the school teachers and the after-schools care. Very smart girl. She played one against the other, saying that the teachers were doing it, after-schools care, so if you don't do it, it's going to be on your head if it fails. And she told the teachers the same thing about the after-schools care.
Genius.
They put it in place. A year later, we were doing a health forum in Newcastle in the town hall. And when I got up to speak, everyone was going, how does this work? Well, she was in the audience. And she came to the front and got up on stage and told everybody where they said he would never do presentations in front of the class. At the age of 7 now he was. He was able to get up there and do that. A year and a half later, she did another testimonial video where they didn't need the psychologist anymore. And with the doctor's approval, it reduced his medication. By reducing his medication, he wasn't as dumbed down by the medication. He was more alert. And because it's just a matter of talking to them in the way in which they need to be spoken to, create their environment so that their conditions don't get triggered. And half the time, a child who's only got a few conditions, or very mild, now get exacerbated because we put them under all this pressure and now we've got to medicate them and fit them back into the box.
Yeah.
So we create these problems for ourselves. But the testimonial videos went on. And 10 years later, she did a recent one where she talked about how now first of all, before that he was 14 and he was 6'1", so he's a big boy. And you can imagine if you've got a child who's uncontrollable, how difficult that would be at that size. But as she said, you mentioned Jack's name and her whole face lights up. And she talks about the conversations they have and everything else. And she's now a death doula, so people who help others at the end of life, helping them transition, help the families and everything else, help them to get themselves sorted out and all their things in place. And she brought the team of death doulas that she works with to come and do a course with me. So she's still coming back.
Yeah.
And we have panel discussions on the Campfire Project, of which she's a regular on there, and I just did one the other night with her. So where it comes down to, it's not just about having a client. My clients always become long-term relationships.
Yeah.
And they keep coming back. There's more things that they learn along the way.
I want to come back to the Campfire Project. Can you explain to me why the pictures over the shoulder, why the picture of the hand? What's the significance?
Well, first of all, when you're looking straight at someone's face, all you can see is that dimension.
Sorry, so was it over the shoulder looking at the back of their head or looking straight over them?
Straight over, so 90 degrees.
90 degrees, yep.
So I'm seeing the side of the face.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so like a mug shot. Like a mug shot.
So face on, just the
Yep.
head, and the head from over the shoulders.
Yes.
And then the hand itself, well, it's both of you, just put your dominant hand up like that, and put your fingers together like a stop sign. Okay, rightio. You're a calculated risk taker, and Jonathan, you're more somebody who will make a decision but then think about the decision before you rush into it. Other people who have got the opposite trait to you, definitely you're one extreme and they're at the other. You and I are in the middle. But the people who have got a risk taker trait, and if you look at the hand, this is one everyone who's listening to this can have a look at. Put your hand up like a stop sign, your dominant hand, and look at the height, not the length of the finger, but the height of the first finger and the third finger. You'll notice mine are about the same height, the same as Adriana, yours is at the same height. On your dominant hand, yeah.
Yeah, like that.
Yep. And on Jonathan's, you'll notice that your ring finger's slightly shorter.
Yep.
Okay. For anybody out there who's got the long ring finger, here's a thing for them. You're coming up to a set of lights, and they're green, but as you get to them, they go amber. What do? And I guarantee everybody who's got the long ring finger has said, gun it.
Just as a disclaimer, if you're driving listening to this podcast, please keep both hands on the wheel. Try this when you are stopped at the lights and your handbrake is up and you're in a park position. Insane.
Yeah. But when they're the same length, we're calculated risk takers, so we're just as likely to go through the amber light. We've already worked out who's up our tail, who's on the side streets, are there any cops around, is there a red light camera?
I think of all of those things.
Yeah. That's a calculated risk taker. Whereas somebody who's averse to taking risks, they will, if I ask them that question, they usually hesitate and they think about it and they finally say, oh no, I stop, because they don't rush into it. Now, somebody who is a risk taker with a long ring finger, that's one trait that goes towards being a great options or currency trader, because making quick decisions, getting in, getting out. As far as investments go, the short ring finger, because they stop and they think about things. So if you're buying properties or shares, then you're going to research, you're going to make sure it's absolutely right before you rush into it.
So to everybody in our networks, when we next catch up, I will be checking out your ring fingers on your dominant hand, because I know many people are in currency and property, and I want to see if this is legit.
And so then you put the other traits towards it, and then you build the bigger picture again, because no one trait defines you, and there is no right or wrong trait.
Yeah.
Every trait's got an upside, every trait's got a downside. As I say, just with that risk taker trait, the upside is quick to action, but at the same time, they can rush into things. When it comes to health and finances, they need to slow down. Somebody who's averse to taking risks, well, most of the time, don't be so worried about checking everything.
Yeah.
But hey, the other advantage is that you're not going to get ripped off as quickly as somebody who rushes into things.
Yeah.
So and then it becomes a combination. If I profile somebody as they walk past me in the street, what stands out the most on your face? What stands out second? And within about 6 or 7 traits, 8 traits, I've got the bulk of your personality, because the things that don't stand out are more towards the middle of the road. And then the middle of the road become the mediators between the two extremes of any trait.
Yeah.
But it's not going to really affect the sway in the things that they do. So the ones that are at the extremes, so the traits that really stand out, I'll pick those up. If somebody's 10, 12 feet away from me as they're walking towards me, by the time they've gone past my shoulder, I can tell you their personality. I can tell you how they'll respond, how to sell to them, and all the rest of it.
Mate, you must hate walking down the street. Far out. Do you do that when you walk down the street? You're profiling people as they're walking past?
Oh, I'm always checking and going, what trait stands out on that one? And go,
That must be fascinating.
Well, when I train people, they used to say, do we come to a classroom? And I go, God, no. Yeah. We're going to go out to a cafe. We'll go out to a mall. Look at all those resources walking around.
Brilliant.
I love people watching.
Yeah,
do you have a nice glass of wine as well?
So do I.
Well, that's the other thing. So I get a lot of my students going, what are you doing Friday night?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be a wingman.
I'm going to go a little bit anecdotal here. So, are you a Seinfeld fan?
I haven't really watched it that much. I don't really go for the Jewish humour.
Okay. Well, I don't mean to profile you here, but or pigeonhole you or anything. I can't think of the word. So, in this episode of Seinfeld, right, George is he finds this deaf girl who can read lips, right? And they're at a party and they're looking across the party, and she's sort of lip reading him and telling George what she and him are saying, and she's trying to eavesdrop without actually, being in that conversation. Do you do that as well? Do you like, all right, so this is happening over there, this is happening over there, like read people like that as a party trick? Not that I'm trying to wrap up your job as a party trick, but I'm just saying, would you use that skill?
Every day.
Oh. So when are we going for that drink?
Well, I remember a young fellow who were at one of the networking dues in Newcastle. It was on a Friday afternoon. And we'd finished that, and he said, I'll walk back with you, because his office is on the way. I was walking back to my place, and we got to his office. He went, hang on, I'm enjoying the conversation. We'll go a little bit further.
Yeah.
And I go, something's going on here. We get up to where I turn off, and he goes, the Delaney Hotel down here, they call it the office. Every Friday afternoon, that's where everyone went.
Yeah.
And he said, why don't you have a drink? And I said, right, you get the drinks in. I'm not going to be your wingman, but you get the drinks in, and then you can tell me what you think's going on in the room, and I'll tell you what is going on in the room. And, of course, we went in, and he said, this guy's going really well. I went, no, he's not. I said, he's going home alone.
Yeah.
And he's with this girl. And he said, but, she's tilting her head and she's touching her hair. And I go, and yes, and where are her feet facing? They're not facing towards him. When she's doing most of this, there's a guy on the other side of the room. And I said, and he's going home alone as well, because he's not even picking any of this up.
Yeah.
And, I described it all the way through, and at the end of the night, they turn the lights up. Well, it's time to go. Well, it's like you walk into the kitchen, you turn the lights up, and the cockroaches scurry everywhere. Yeah. And that's what it's like in the pub. So everyone's going to for their last drinks, and the guys are trying to get that last word in to try. That
desperation, yeah.
And, the guys went out the door. They called a cab and jumped in it. And I heard one of the girls saying to a girlfriend, okay, let's go up to Finnegan's now, which is the Irish pub, and see who can buy us drinks for the rest of the night.
Oh, tactical.
Yeah.
Bastards. Tactical. So I've got... sorry, mate. This is my spot, right? Okay. Are you familiar with Neil Strauss?
No, not really.
Okay. He writes a book called The Game, right? It's about the art of picking up women. Now, he uses all of these sort of tells that you talk about. Could you train what you've got to pick up women?
You could, but I wouldn't.
No,
Simply
it's dangerous.
No,
It's rude.
Simply for the reason that, as I said, I do everything I do with respect.
Hmm.
So if men want to have better lives and everything else, part of it is respecting the women.
Yeah.
It's treating them the right way, because you treat the woman the right way, you're going to get a hell of a lot more. And most of the guys who are out there, it's all about ego. I've had some friends. Well, one guy who was in a bike gang, he boasted about how he'd had 200 women in his life. And I'm going, not one genuine relationship in there.
Yeah, no way. That's true.
It's very lonely and everything else. To have a partner, I've been married and divorced twice. I've had a lot of women in my life, but the ones I feel jealous of is the guy who's had that one woman that he's met younger, he's stayed with her all that time, and they've still got love between them.
Yeah.
That is something to be cherished.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous thing.
Here.
So
Here to that.
hand reading, for me, that seems like a bit of a generalization, right? Could be very accurate. But what's your thoughts on like astronomy? You know how people what are they called, star signs? Mm-hmm. Like that's just a generalization as well. How accurate are those? Or
Well, see, this is why I moved away from psychometric profiling like Myers-Briggs and DISC and things like that, because you're putting 7.7 billion people in the planet into 16 different boxes. Now, there's a thing called the Barnum test, or Barnum effect. They had a whole bunch of people and they got them all to do a profile, and I'm not quite sure it was based around the horoscopes or whatever, but they had about a dozen or so people. And at the end of it, they gave them all an envelope and said, right, here's your report. We want you to open it up, but you're not allowed to say a word. We want you to read it, and then we're going to ask you some questions. And everyone read their reports, and then they asked them, well, how accurate it was. And they were saying, oh, that was really accurate. Don't tell us anything that is in the report, but they all raved about how accurate it was. Then they said, okay, got one guy to stand up and go, right, you read yours out. And as he's reading it, everyone else is going, that's what I've got. Every one of them got the same report. So when you generalise down into a small number, this is where it falls down.
Yeah.
And a lot of things are based on our emotions as well. So if you look at DISC profiling, for instance, you might say that somebody's quite direct and everything else, but they just could be having a really shitty day and they're annoyed and everything else, and they're acting out of character. And so that was one of the reasons why I found that I needed to have something that was more effective, because when you ask people questions, you're affected by their emotions, their gender, their education levels, their understanding of the words. Because if I said to both of you, what's your definition of the word loyalty? It'll be different. And I guarantee it's going to be different between the genders as well. And so with that, when you ask questions, you're getting interpretations. Now, when it comes to people say, oh, I've got a lot of friends who are DISC profiles, and they say, well, look, I can look at somebody and then watch them and I can read all that. And I go, yes, but if you're having a good day or a bad day, your tolerance levels vary, and therefore you're going to see that person differently, especially if they're borderline on one of those dichotomies. And so they say, well, what about yours? And I go, well, it doesn't matter if I'm happy or sad. I'm still going to read people the same way, simply because I'm looking at the dimensions of the face. If I take the number 3 and divide it by 4, there's only 2 answers I can get, and they're the same answer. One is 0.75, or the other one is 75%. And so with that, it doesn't matter if I'm happy or sad. It comes down to math virtually. I'm going to be the same answer every time. And so it's then how much I'm able to pick up in someone's face. Then it depends on my emotions, how observant I am as far as little twitches and things like that, the micro expressions. But I'm going to pick stuff up because there's so much happening that's out there. So and that's why I realised I had to move away to really be respectful of the person I was profiling. I had to move to a system where I couldn't ask them a question. And that's why when I hear different profilers, talking and they're arguing about who's got the best system, I let them go, and at the end of it, I pull a photograph out and throw it on the table and go, okay, guys, tell me about this one. And we can't. Tell us about the person. I go, no, tell us from the photograph. And then if they don't believe that, I get them to pull their wallets out or their phones out, show me a face that I know I've never seen, or they know I've never seen in my life, and I profile them and tell them all about that person. And that's when they go, okay, no more arguments.
On the body language side of things, we were in Italy, and I think we were in San Gimignano, weren't we? And we were sitting outside this perfume shop, sold kind of face creams, colognes and stuff. And the owner was sitting over the road, so literally other side of the room.
Giuseppe.
Yeah, he was sitting, of course it was. He was sitting there at the coffee shop, and he just let people go into his shop. And we were sitting there watching this, and he just let people mill around and pick stuff up, put it down. And we're just sitting there, we're talking to him, and we said, why aren't you going in to help them? He said, I've learned something over the years. He said, if a husband and wife or a couple, male and female, go in, I will only get up and go in when the man has unfolded his arms and is walking with his arms down by his side. Because he said normally the men go in and their arms are crossed or they're in their pockets or whatever, which means he took as they're closed, they're not willing to buy anything. But as soon as his hands came out of the pockets or as soon as they unfolded, he was in. And I would say 4 out of 5 times he was bang on the money while we're sitting there having coffee, just watching him go past. It was hysterical. Hysterical.
So there are a few misnomers when it comes to body language. I'll talk about folded arms, person's rejecting.
Yeah.
It could also be they're cold. It could be they've got sore shoulders. It could be a whole mass of reasons. But I'm looking for the changes. So if you've got someone who's standing there and they've got their arms folded, but they're leaning in and their feet are facing towards you and they're nodding and everything else, you got their attention.
Yeah.
The folded arms could be that they're intimidated by you and they're just giving themselves a warm hug.
Yeah.
But when they unfold their arms, now I know they've really stepped in.
Yeah.
So it's the variation, not so much the actual folding of the arms, but what happens.
There you go.
The arms unfolding.
Yeah, I fold my arms a lot. And I don't think it's not a negative thing.
No, it's not.
No.
See, some people, they're thrown at the deep end. They'll, you'll protect yourself. I'll give you an example. There was, I was at a networking do in Newcastle, and this guy came over, who's spoken to me earlier, sometime before. He brought his boss over. His boss was the bank manager of the local bank. And he introduced me, and anyway, his boss asked me, he said, tell me about this folded arms business. And I said, what's your problem with folded arms? And emphasising the word your problem. And he said, my second in charge here was the guy who introduced me. He said, he's always got his arms folded when I'm talking to him. And I go, well, what's your problem? And he goes, but, I was told that means they're not interested in everything else. I said, well, tell me, does he do it with anybody else in the branch? He said, oh, no, it's only with me. I went, right, when you go out to these sort of do's and you're meeting other bank managers, etc., you take them to head office. He said, yeah. I said, does he do it then? He goes, oh, he does. And I said, well, tell me, when you're talking to him, does he listen? Does he do what you ask him to do? And he goes, yes, he does. I said, and more importantly, when you're not there, does he follow through on the things that he said he would do for you? He said, yes, he does. I said, so he's a good second-hand man? He goes, yeah, he's really good. And I go, then why would you want to get his arms unfolded? Because if he's doing that to make himself comfortable, now he's uncomfortable. And he's not going to be listening to you because now he's focused on his uncomfortability and you've lost that connection. Well, it was about 6 months later, I was at a finance exhibition in town and I was talking to this guy and he asked me about what I did and I told him, and he was from a different bank. And he said, can you tell me about this arms folded business? And I said, why? He said, I had this manager, about 12 years ago. It was always on my back about folding my arms and everything else. And I found out that, I said, well, is he still with your bank? He said, no, he went over, and it was the other bank manager. 12 years, he has had this belief, and I thought, well, how many relationships has he screwed up and the opportunities he's missed because of that one belief, because someone on stage at some stage has used that as part of the entertainment. That's another thing, because I'm an educator. I do keynote addresses and things like that, but I find it, I want to make sure that I'm not just there to entertain people.
Yeah.
Because people will walk away with a little bit of knowledge. And as I say, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. And this guy had been screwed up for at least 12 years.
Wow.
Probably longer.
Far out.
Yeah, the engagements he's missed out on.
That's it.
Yeah.
The staff that didn't trust him.
Let's jump into, you mentioned it earlier on, the Campfire Project. Talk to us about that.
Well, with all the men in particular that I was talking to in business, and I'd ask them, especially when because the facial features, first of all, told me their personality, but then the expressions would tell me if there's something emotional going on as well. And I realised when we started talking about the businesses and the workplace and the relationships within the workplace, I found that a lot of men saying that they were confused. They didn't know their role in the family. They, you go out, you pay for the mortgage and everything else, and then because you're not home, now you're in trouble for that. And they just said, we just can't win. And in the workplace, we've got all these gender issues and everyone's after quotas and everything else, and we feel like we might have the skills, but somebody else is getting the job because of it, and we've got to be watching what we say, political correctness. And I thought, okay, men needed a place to be able to, a safe place where they could tell their stories. And I've always believed that it takes a village or a community to raise children, not just the parents on their own, but it also is the community's responsibility to create a safe place where men can then give themselves permission to tell their stories. And if men, because we're trying to cut down on domestic violence and everything else, we're trying to cut down on bullying. So the first thing you do with a bully is you beat the bully up. Well, that's how I became a bully in the first place. So we've got to break the cycle. And the best way to help men is to help them become stronger. We need more men's groups, but we need men's groups where there is interaction with the females as well.
Yep.
Because otherwise, how does a man know he's got his stuff together? It's like going to a motivational seminar. You're all hyped up and everything else. You go home or out into the real world and you're back to where you were waiting for the next seminar to come along. You become a seminar junkie. And I could see that happening with a lot of the men's groups. So the Campfire Project I created as a closed group on Facebook. Anybody who wants to come in can come in. But the proviso is I don't care about your religion, your culture, your gender or any other thing.
Oh, so it's men and women?
Because that was when I put it together, I told everyone it was a group for men
Yep.
to be able to give themselves permission to tell their stories. But I had women in there from day one.
Yeah.
And if anybody looked at the membership, they were there plain to see.
Yep.
You know, Karen and Julie and all that sort of thing, those sort of names, we know they're not men's names. But the men I started interviewing, one of the first ones, Brian Cardoza in America, he was 6 years old when his brother sold him for sex. And those rapes went on for about 3 years. When he was 9, he was too big for that, but then it was physical and emotional abuse from his mother and brother until he left home at the age of 15. Another guy, D'Angelo Seaton, he was lived in a house full of domestic violence. He just thought that was natural, the way his father used to push his mother around and actually threw her through a plate glass window one day. And he was 15 years old, came home, grabbed his youngest sister out of his parents' room, out of the cot. He had 2 younger brothers and 2 younger sisters, and he was protecting them while he watched his father stab his mother to death. So for those people to come along and start telling their stories, or another friend of mine, Doug Garth, who I would have hated at school because I got bullied all the way through school, and he was a horrific bully at school. And he was on the project a couple of years ago, and I recorded it, watched the video, and then I thought, I need to talk to this guy because I could hear in his voice the change in him. And I found out that he was a bully because of what he copped at the hands of his mother and father. And in fact, 3 of his brothers committed suicide because of the abuse they used to cop.
Oh, my God.
And so with all of that, I realised that all those stories need to be told and men need to be able to share that and get it out. And so I'd interview them one-on-one on Zoom. And then when I had a number of them in there, I then brought them into panel discussions. And the first panel discussion had Brian Cardoza and a couple of others in from America. And we'll cover every subject you can think of. Nothing's taboo. We talked about femininity and masculinity. We've talked about the Gillette ad that they brought out, the toxic masculinity one, which I thought was absolutely appalling.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
We went through all those things, and once we started the panel discussions, that was when the women in the group couldn't contain themselves anymore. And I'm getting personal messages going, we love these guys. We've never heard men talk like this. They're opening up in a way that we thought men couldn't do. We want to be able to talk to them. Is there any chance we can do that? Well, it had already been my plan from the day I put it together, that waiting for the women to put their hands up. And when they did, I brought them into the panel discussions. From there, we went into so first all the one-on-ones. Everyone's got to do a one-on-one first, because that's how you get your credibility. And then bring them into the panel discussions. And from there, the group's grown really well. We've done 225 one-on-ones in the last 2.5 years, because I started in July 2018. And then we started the panel discussions exactly 2 years ago. Today was the 2-year anniversary. And the little memory popped up on Facebook today with Brian Cardoza and the others sitting there. Yeah. And the panel discussions, I just recorded the 93rd one. So in 2 years, we've done 93 of those.
Wow.
From there, we found that I wanted to make sure that, because I believe a leader's role is to make themselves redundant. I've done it in my employment in telecom, I've done it in the surf clubs, I've done it, raising children, help your boys to come up to be the real men that they should be, and they then take on those roles and we step aside. And so my attitude's always been to make myself redundant. And so same thing with the Campfire Project. Okay, I built the bus, I've been driving the bus, but now I'm getting into the passenger seat and others are stepping up. And an example of that is Scott Carson, down in Melbourne. I met him in Sydney a couple of years ago. I interviewed him. He then decided, came into a few of the panel discussions, and then he wanted to interview his father. Now, his father, Lee, he hadn't spoken to much at all over the years. And in fact, Lee, his father, hadn't spoken to Oscar, his grandson, in only 4 times in his 9 years of life. And so he interviewed his father, and Lee was brave enough to let it be recorded and have a go on the Campfire Project. And they delved right into a lot of stuff that had gone on between the two of them. Really brave from both of them. And then since then, young Oscar, who's 9 years old, turned around and said to his dad, I want to interview you. So he did. And he came up with 19 questions of his own, and one of them was, Dad, why is it you can always give to everybody else, but you find it so hard to receive? Now, this is a 9-year-old.
Whoa,
and
that's
so
very intuitive.
That's now gone on to where Scott wants to come up from Sydney and run back to Melbourne where he lives, going through all the Indigenous countries down there and talk to people and hand out smiles, because that's one of his passions, is handing out smiles.
That's lovely.
And his father is going to drive the vehicle that follows, and his son was going to come out of school and travel with his grandfather. So only seen him 4 times in his life, and now that's what's going to happen. So since then, one of the guys that I met quite a number of years ago profiled his kids, who then became one of my students. He then did my master course, and now I do workshops for him because he's a coach. And he's also a marathon runner. So he then came on a panel, met Scott, and they got talking. Now he's going to join the run from Sydney to Melbourne, and he's now going to interview his father and see if he'll travel in the vehicle with Scott's father. And then his 10-year-old son, he'll take him out of school at the same time, because 2 older men will travel together in the car. They've quietly gone their own for a while, for a few days, and then they'll bring the grandsons in and put them in the same vehicle, and while the 2 men are running. And these are the sort of things that are happening. And in all that time, there has not been one conversation where the men or the women have been rude to each other. If somebody doesn't agree with anybody, they go, okay, I don't understand how that works. Can you please explain?
Yeah.
Give me an idea so I know how you're thinking.
Yeah. Productive discourse. Yeah.
Yeah. And from that's led on to me being on leadership forums and mental health summits all over the world. And just recently with the My Business Awards, I was up for a finalist in the Training and Education Business of the Year, but also the Wellness Program and Initiative, which was the Campfire Project. So in all the work we've done in there, it's starting to get recognised, because there's no other group anywhere else that's doing what I'm doing, because I don't see us fixing any problems when we've got isolated camps. We only fix problems when we come shoulder to shoulder, treat each other with respect, and when we're doing that, we find the real beauty that's in depth in all of us, and with that, we move forward. And if you've just got a men's group or a women's group, they're going to be combatant. Yeah.
And I think one of the things I picked up from what you were saying earlier on the bullying is actually breaking the cycle. So the father-son, the generational interviews, let's call it that. If
that's it.
That's very, very powerful.
Yeah. See, the whole thing is that if you've got, as I said, our boys, our girls, our children learn from us, not by what we say, but what we do. Yes, we might talk a lot, but then it'll be the discourse between what we do and what we say. It'll always, like I said, how many times have you heard somebody that says everything right, but you have that gut feeling something is wrong, and you'll always distrust them.
Yep.
So we always go with the non-verbals. So, and the actions that we have. So you've got to make sure that you're doing the right thing, being the best version of yourself. And if men are trying to be competitive and be the best, then the end result is, they're trying to be the man. Well, you've got no friends. You're always looking over your shoulder. I guarantee you while you're looking over your right shoulder, somebody will pass you on the left side.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to be a man and being the best man that you can be, then part of that is that the connection you have with your partners, the women and everything else, are going to be so much more respectful. Men, we've got all these emotions in us. We can't shut off any emotions. I grew up, I went through a lot when I was a kid, so I lived on anger. That's how I stayed alive. I was 9 years old when I tried to commit suicide from the pressure that I was getting from home and also from school. And with that, I realised that, and I can talk about that because there's so many other men out there who are feeling the same way. And I realised that I stayed alive because of the anger I had towards everybody else. So anger kept me alive. It was a good thing. So, and if somebody attacked my family, I'm going to get angry.
Yeah.
Now I'm not going to turn the other cheek, because the emotion, we have all those emotions in us all the time, and the whole thing is, don't get rid of them, but learn to understand them. If you feel an emotion, name it, sit with it, understand it, because when you understand it, it no longer controls you.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I love finding out all the downsides of the different traits I had. And I got some doozies. And I realised that, okay, now I know I went through so many relationships and things that I missed, and I go, and I can laugh about it. Because if I understand that, I have dominion over it, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So when a trait gets triggered, I go, oh, yeah, I know what that is. And I can laugh about it. And I can switch in a moment, because everything that we have, every one of our responses is a choice. Nobody does anything to us. The environment may appear in a certain way, but it's our choice on how we decide to handle it. So the more I can understand all of those things, the more I'm in control.
How did you get into this years ago? Because this is something that's really coming. I mean, I think we've just scratched the surface now with all the industries. So you've been doing this for your whole career.
Pretty much my whole life.
So how did you get into it? How did you fall into? Was it just an interest in body language? Was it journalism? Was it on a byproduct of your schooling? What was the bit you went?
It's been you'll hear a lot of the new age say that we're the sum of all of our experiences, and that is so true. It started off with what I went through when I was younger. My father died when I was 3, so I had no role models. When I came to Newcastle, I was 23 years old, and I was put in charge of that group of men who were older than me. So I had to start to understand those relationships, and I used body language because that, as I said, was the flavour of the month back then. Excuse me. And with that, I then realised that I still wasn't connecting with them. So I looked at, in the 80s, the Myers-Briggs and then disc profiling and things, and started working with those. And in the 90s, started getting into NLP, the new linguistic programming, to understand how to actually phrase things and steer conversations and activities. But when I was in my mid-30s, I joined the surf club. And now I'm pretty much the same age as most of the others in the club. They talked me into being a patrol captain, and what they did was, I found out why. They gave me everybody that nobody else wanted. I was a dumping ground. Well, we became the patrol of the year. And so the next year they said, well, we want you to be the club captain. And I went, okay. So I kept that, and as I said before, the job of a leader is to make themselves redundant. So in that patrol, I kept that patrol together and promoted one of the guys into the patrol captain's job. And I extracted myself from all the awards that following year, and they still won the award at the Patrol of the Year again. And that was with everybody else's vote. That was the whole club's vote. And so as the club captain, then they taught me into being, because we had a problem with one of the chief examiners. He didn't like our club. One of the guys who had come over from another club and joined us had put his nose out of joint. And so I rang him up and said, look, mate, I know where you live. I'm coming around to see you. And I said, we'll sit down, we'll have a cup of coffee and we'll sort this out. Well, by the time I left his place, we'd emptied his fridge of the beer as well. We just really solved the problems. He then taught me into coming into the zone. I became a zone supervisor looking after 3 beaches, in Stockton, Nobbies and Newcastle. And, we grew the club quite dramatically and everything else. So that was when, now I'm, from being the youngest in business, I'm now the least experienced in the surf club, because all these guys and girls were all they were nippers when they joined. Very young age. And as I said, Alan, you're only been here 5 minutes. And I go, well, tough luck, guys. You put me in charge. And this is what's got to get done.
Yeah.
And then in my, I was 38, and my first wife decided she wanted to leave. And she wanted to go and find herself. So I gave her the sports car so she could get there faster. And I kept the 3 sons. They were 4, 11 and 12.
Result.
So now I'm raising my sons.
Yeah.
And so I went from being a situation where I'd been the youngest, the least experienced, and as I always say, right out of my depth. That was when I really got an appreciation and an understanding of what mothers go through, especially single mothers, or the mother who's holding down a job and the husband comes home and sits and watches TV or whatever, and the mother's then got to look after the kids and everything else. She's got a 24/7 job. Virtually, if a child wakes up through the night, she's the one who's got to get up. And the husband's doing just the normal job, like doing overtime and things like that. And I realised, okay, there was a lot more I needed to understand, and I got a bit of appreciation. So that was about 94, I think it was. that I really started to look at that side of it. But it was around about 2000 I got married the second time. That was only a short marriage, only 2 years, much younger partner. And I realised then that I still didn't understand people. I really needed to know what made them tick. The next thing you know, I see when I started searching the web after that retreat that I helped the mate with, that I saw a book on the internet called "What Makes People Tick" by Naomi Tickle, and I looked at that. And then I found Paul Ekman, and I thought this all sounds pretty cool. So I ended up signing up with the Ekman group and did some of their training, which on the micro expressions. And I met Naomi, and Naomi said to me, "Well, don't do any other profiling until you get your head around this one." And I went, whoops, too late. I'm already training with Paul's group. And I did the online course with her. And then she came back to me and she said, "You've learnt this so fast and you've learned it at a high level," because I just threw myself right into it. And where we're supposed to be meeting once a week, that turned into Zoom calls or Skype calls every, what would have been 2 to 3 days. And so we got through the course really quickly. We kept on talking. She knew I had a passion of education and helping families and everything else. And she finally said to me, "Am I coming over there or are you coming over here to do your masters?" And I went, "Well, what happens if you come over here?" She said, "Well, you have to get all these people in so we can profile them and everything else and pay my accommodation and everything else." And I'm thinking, I can go to America, holiday. You're going to do it. I'm coming to you.
Yeah.
So I started training with her, and it wasn't very long because I was in an accommodation which was a few kilometres away and there was no public transport.
Yeah.
So her husband used to come and pick me up in the morning and then bring me back in the afternoon. And one day he said, "I'm not picking you up anymore." And I went, "Well, how am I going to get there?" He said, "No, grab your bags, you're moving in with us." And so I ended up moving in and staying with them. So we ended up I was training 5 or 6 days a week. And then on the seventh day, I thought, right, I've got to rest. So I'm going to show you around the place. We're going off to garden parties and other things. And what happens when you take a profiler to a garden party?
Yeah.
You're profiling everybody.
absolutely.
So it was 37 days a week. And Naomi's become a beautiful friend.
Yeah.
And so once she found out I was going into education about 2 years ago, a young guy, she sent him to me and she said, "Can you train him?" I said, "Well, why can't you train him?" She said, "Well, I've already been training him and he wants to go into education in South Africa." And so I said, "Okay," and I trained him. And at the end of it, one of the things I said to him, "Well, what's your priority here? Is it just to teach them how to read the trades, or is it to connect and coach them and help them through issues and problems in the school?" He said, "Oh, the latter." He said, "I want a mentor, I want a coach."
Yeah.
I said, "Great. Well, would my online resources, if you had access to those, help you?" And he went, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, how about I give you the next 6 months of my time free to make sure that you can build this up to where you can get into education over there. And as an affiliate partner, I'm making money with all the people he's working with." And and then I've got the kudos of that to be able to come back to the Australian education systems and say to them, "Well, look," because one of the things when I got introduced by the state premier here, when it was Mike Baird, with the education minister, Adrian Piccolo, back in those days, 2012 originally, they said, "Well, you don't have any credentials and we don't endorse third parties." I'm going, "I don't want you to endorse me. I want you guys to apply this, test it for yourselves." "Oh, we don't do that. We only get finished products." And I went, "Great."
Yeah.
So I did have what I called my 12 months of temporary insanity.
Yep.
Because when they said you need a degree or whatever, I signed up with open universities and started doing a psychology degree. In the first years, getting distinctions and high distinctions and everything else, and then realising part-time, working 7 days a week in my job, in my own business, plus also doing the training, that was going to be 6 years before I finished. And then after that, I'd only be an undergraduate and they'd be looking for something else, and I went, "The hell with that."
Yeah.
So I chucked it in after the 12 months, and I thought, "No, I've got to find a new way." And when I was just before I went to London with Gillette and Disney, a friend of mine had been at a women's awards night over at Manly, and Mike Baird was there, and she was sitting on the same table with him, talked about me, and so next thing you know, I was overseeing the Lord Mayor over there, who was one of his administrators, and she said, "We've got to get you back into the education department." So while I'm overseas, instead of meeting with Deek this time, it was with the head psychologist for New South Wales. And of course, as we went through it, same thing comes out again. Well, the letter I got from the Premier on both occasions, kids are the most important thing to us. We've really we put so much in. We put all this money into them. But third thing is we don't endorse third parties. Both letters identical to each other, just a figure that was different, and that was 40 years apart. And so I thought, rightio, this is something that I need a different approach. And talking to the head psychologist, she said to me, well, what you've told us is absolutely true. We're not really going anywhere with this. We're not moving forward. But we reckon if we continue doing what we're doing, sooner or later we're going to get a different result. And I thought, what did Einstein say?
That's that's the definition of
opposite, isn't it?
And so I thought, no, this is just another fob off.
Yeah.
So I produced a course which I'm also a board member of the Montessori Primary School on the Central Coast. So I wanted to know more about schools and doing accreditations as a director of the school, and in all of that. You try talking. The end result was I understood more about that side of it. So now I've got a course for parents where the parents could understand the children. Just 3 traits.
Yep.
And those 3 traits are the ones that I see are a real problem at school.
Yep.
The ones that they mislabel the kids with ADHD and other conditions.
Yeah.
Is that frequent?
Oh, it happens frequently. And so...
That's that box thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's the 16 boxes.
Yeah, putting kids into boxes again.
Yeah.
So with that, I thought, rightio, put that one up for accreditation as an ongoing professional development program. But and when I was talking to the education department, was, if you get this working overseas, then bring it back here, then we'll look at it. That was why I thought, right, with Lawazi over there in South Africa, help him, get him successful, and bring it back. So if I can't get in the front door, I'll come down the chimney, I'll come in the back door, I'll kick up a floorboard, I'll get in some way or another.
Yeah.
I've been 2 decades at trying to make changes in education. I'm not giving up. So,
That seems to be where, when we look at all the applications you mentioned, that seems to be where your heart's at. I think that is that really. I get the sense you want to make the biggest impact.
That's it.
If you're going to step aside as the leader, but that's where you want the momentum to continue is on education, those kids,
Exactly.
families. Is that right?
yeah. See, and if I go into corporate, that's where you make your most money. When it comes to working with people and really getting into the issues and everything else, those business owners of small and medium enterprises, I love working with them. But where I really get the great excitement and the most joy, it won't get the most money, but definitely the most joy is when I work with parents and children. For, as I said, the young Jake, Jack I should say, who I profiled 10 years ago, and the results his mother's still getting. I've been, it was about 2 years ago now, or about a year and a half or so, a friend of mine's been involved with the Buddhist community, and the monks would come up from from Melbourne, down from Brisbane, across from Perth, just to take him out and go out to dinner. He's been involved with them for a long time. He talked me into going along a couple of times, and I hit it off with him. And then one of the last times I were up here, or a couple of years ago now, when they came up, they asked me to come and pick them up and take them to the restaurant. They wanted me to pick them up an hour and a half early, and the restaurant's about 10 minutes away. And I go, something's going on. Well, I turned up and they had a young school teacher there, Miss Sandy, and I asked her, what was going on, and she said, well, she wanted to know more about the reading the kids because she runs an after-schools care program in Las Vegas, I think it is. Los Angeles. And she works with 120 kids after school and a whole bunch of teachers. And she's young, and so she's not getting on with notes of the teachers and all the rest of it. But there was one boy in particular who was always seeing the principal every other day, getting into trouble. So I said, right, well, if you can get the parents involved, and if the parents send me photographs, then I'll profile. I won't do it for you, but if the parents ask me, I'll do it. So the parents sent me over the photographs. I profiled his image and sent them back a written report so that she had a copy of it and they had a copy of it. We did a Zoom call, and they're at their home and she's at the school, so a 3-way conversation. And once I've profiled a child, I tell them all about their traits and how the traits interact and what things will push their buttons, because now I do an audio, I can really get into it. And once they've been through that a few times, I then get the parents online. Well, this time I had the school teacher as well. And I look at the parents and the school teacher on the spot and go, right, your traits are telling me this is how you like to talk, this is how you need to talk to this child around this way. And so I've got all the parents and the school teacher changing differently, but all speaking the same to him. Well, it wasn't long before he was no longer seeing the principal. His academic levels went up. His father was saying that his behaviour at home had really improved. And then August that year was the end of the school year, and then he went on to his his next, because he was 11 years old, so he went into elementary school or whatever, or it was a junior high or whatever. And as he went into that, so I still don't get my head around their education system, but as he went into that in January, late January, I got a message from his father, another testimonial going, he's continued to improve. He's no longer got Miss Sammy teaching him, but he's got new teachers, but they've spoken to the other teachers, and his behaviours continue to improve, and so is his academic levels. And that excites me.
Yeah.
Because if you're able to help kids, they're the next generation of adults. And
They're going to look after us.
Breaking that cycle.
exactly.
Breaking
because,
the cycle.
We complain about the younger generations.
Don't do anything.
But the younger generations, who train them? Go look in the mirror.
Yeah, exactly right.
We did. And as I said, they've observed us. We make people say, I didn't speak to them. No, they've been watching you. We're back to that ingraining patterning that goes on with the younger people. And so they've watched, and they therefore have expectations. We wrap children up in cotton wool and we give them trophies for turning up.
Knife, place, ribbon.
Yeah, and so the end result is we're setting them up for failure. Helicopter parenting, I hope I don't offend anybody here, well, don't really care if I do, but when it comes to helicopter parenting, I see that as child abuse.
Yeah.
Because you want to feel better about yourself and you're robbing your child from those experiences. Now, your job is to keep their environment safe, not cotton wool safe. They've got to be able to experiment, they've got to be able to learn. You guide them, you stand back, you wear the pain of worrying about them. Don't put it on them by stopping them from doing anything.
Yeah.
Because that will affect their future.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Alan, we've been going for 90 minutes. I feel like we've just started. I think we're going to wrap up here. I'm going to ask two more things of you, if that's okay.
Yep.
And I might regret the first one. I wouldn't mind you profiling me. And I appreciate we've probably asked...
No one wants to hear that.
Yeah, you've asked questions. You might get a sense of me, but you did the Italian stallion. I'm quite keen to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, well, again, as I said before, quite comfortable standing close to people when you meet them for the first time. A bit more analytical than as I said, that you were before, because you're looking at the overview. With Jonathan, you're more about the analytical side of things, being able to have more information when you're looking at that. So with that, you're going to be quick to, slow to work through things, but you're also going to be very quick and once you've got it together, you've also got what I call a objective thinking style. So where some people are very sequential and everything's got to be very much together and lined up properly. In your case, it's going to be that it has to be, you can pull from all over the place. So if you're learning something new and you can think, something that I've done in the past fits that, you can pull it into it very quickly. Whereas somebody who's sequential, it's like painting by numbers. They have to fully understand the first bit, then understand the second bit, bolt that together with the first, and they're slower in learning. So yes, even though you're analytical and highly analytical, you'll then you'll pull it together from all over the place and then give me the best way to do it. When you're talking though, you're going to be fairly, where some people are very concise, you're going to be a little bit more verbose. So you're going to give them more information. But both of you, and that, as I said before, have got the automatic giving, quick to give to people. Now, I also see that your level of confidence is towards the higher side, but it's still in the middle. So when it comes to somebody who with your face on the other side is a little bit more wider, and this is in the width of the face. The wider the face, the more the natural self-confidence. And think about it. When you look at anybody who's got a wide face, or look at people's face and you see someone with a wide face, ask yourself, do you see them as having more confidence than somebody who's standing next to them with a narrow face? And you'll find that in all the testing they did, the wider faces always seem to be more confident, or assumed to be. At the same time, they act as though they're more confident, but we don't know they've got their stuff until we put them to the test. But so with the very narrow face, they're the ones who will go away and practice things. So being in the middle towards the high, it means that you're in the mediator position. So if you've got someone with a very wide face, a very narrow face, who normally one would be looking at the other going, for God's sake, get a move on, and the other one saying, you're a cocky bugger, I can't wait for you to fall on your backside, then you're able to slip in the middle and be the mediator between them.
Yeah.
And so you can then work with both of those. See, there's no wrong or right trait, and if we understand the traits, we can put them in the right places. As I was saying that you're a little bit more sceptical. In your case, Jonathan, you're more about, you'll ask questions, but not as many questions. You won't need as many. And you're probably not as fussy about getting things absolutely right. So you're not so much the detailed one when it comes to that. Plus, it's pull the things together as quickly as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's not, you're more towards still the value is important to you, but possibly not as strong as it is with other people.
You're calling me a tight ass.
As I just look across the table.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, I appreciate that. And then my final question is, you've got a table booked for 4 in a restaurant. Mm-hmm. Who are the other 3 people that you're going to be dining with and why? And they don't have to be alive.
Well, I just asked this on a podcast yesterday. I've got who were 2 famous, or 2 people who were dead and who were 2 people who were alive, and I came up with, well, as far as the dead go, it would have been Nelson Mandela, because I'd love to have a conversation with him, and also Mother Teresa to get her understanding of what she did. And the second reason for her was one of the 2 people who were alive. Besides Richard Branson, because we've got a lot of similar ideas and leadership and everything else. I think it'd be a very interesting conversation with him. But there's a friend of mine, Kenny Mamarella de Cruz, over in London. He left to Uganda when he was a young boy, when their family had to get out to save their lives. Mm-hmm. He's worked across the world. He's actually worked with Mother Teresa in some of her hospitals. Wow. He's now known as the Man Whisperer over in London. He works with men's groups. And every conversation with him is absolutely magic. I just can't get enough of the guy. Okay. And so they would be... I know a lot of people will always go for the famous people and everything else, but one of the things I've learned through life is that my greatest teachers have been the kids, and the elderly, because the elderly have got such stories and they think their life is over, they've got nothing to give. Those experiences they've had, they share those, they've got a wealth of knowledge. And then, I don't look at somebody having to have a high degree or anything else, because most of those I find that are probably more arrogant than anything else. I just want to talk to the genuine people. Kids teach me a lot. So it's everything from the young to the elderly. So I don't look for famous people, I look for genuine people. Perfect.
Well, Alan, I think on that, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning. It's that hour and a half has just flown by, and I haven't even got half of my questions out of the way, but maybe we'd have to get you back, or maybe we'll come up to Newcastle for an excuse for a weekend away.
Sounds good.
How do people get hold of you? Because I can imagine there's going to be a lot of questions, or have you got resources people can download? You mentioned a few things.
Yep.
How do people reach out?
Well, the best way is through my website. And if they go to my website, I always say go to the success story page, because that's where you'll hear everybody, all the video testimonials, so they'll understand what it's all about. But my website is alanstevens.com.au, and it's Alan with ALAN and Stevens, STEVENS. But if after the .com.au they put a / the number 7 and the word secrets, then they can download. I'll get 6 emails over 11 days, which will show them how to read a number of traits, how it all works first of all, 3 different traits that they can see in people's faces very quickly and know how to use those traits. And then the one after that talks about the direction of where the eyes move, and how you can look at understanding where people are sourcing information from, and that'll give them a bit of an interest into that. And the Campfire Project, well, they'll find that by just doing a search on the Campfire Project. And I know somebody else grabbed the word campfire as 1 word, so if you search campfire as 2 words, that'll come up. And they'll be able to find the Campfire Project there. Excellent.
Awesome. And we'll include links in the notes as well. Alan, thank you very much for coming on. Enjoy your few days in Sydney, catching up with your friends, not on the North Shore. Wish you a very Merry Christmas, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what 2021 brings for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.